our state capitol today with our Hartford delegation. Was very, very proud to be there. So today is officially the kickoff of our fiscal year ending 2019 budget. We will have a presentation from the mayor, and it is really an opportunity for the public to provide feedback on the mayor's recommended budget. So from here, we will have him do the presentation, give community folks to give any feedback. But after today, we will then shift into council's departmental hearings, where council will actually go a little deeper and more in depth and do our due diligence and work through the mayor's recommended budget in anticipation of adopting a budget by the end of May. At the end, I'll share more information about the departmental hearing budget. I believe there should be handouts at the front regarding that schedule, but without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to the mayor to take us through his PowerPoint slide. Thank you.
All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you, Council President Thames, and to all the members of the City Council, and thanks to everybody who's here tonight. So what I'm going to do tonight is talk a little bit about what we've faced over the last couple of years, how we've dealt with it, and what this budget represents. But I want to start by saying that this budget really represents a continuation of the last year's fiscal budget. In those first 2 years that we've together faced Hartford's fiscal crisis, we've made some very challenging cuts. We've asked our labor unions to partner in significant ways, and we've built a new partnership with the state of Connecticut. And our commitment is to remain focused on discipline, remain willing to do what's necessary to produce the stability that we need so that we can grow. And as we go through this, hopefully everyone will keep in mind that this is a step in a long process. We are, I hope and I believe, at the point where our mission now is to preserve stability rather than battle crisis. And with that, let me start it off. We can start with the first slide. As I just spoke to, when we came here together 2 years ago and again last year, the future was very uncertain. Facing that fiscal crisis, we chose a path of transparency and honesty and shone a big, bright light on the challenges that we faced. The challenges were deep, they were a long time in the making, and we knew they weren't going to be solved overnight or without partnership, but we committed to building that. Next slide, please. As we built that partnership, as we worked to make the case that while we did the difficult things here in Hartford to put the city on a long-term path, we needed to build a new partnership with the state. We also made the case that Hartford is essential to the state's success. And that's for a whole lot of reasons. You know, the city of Hartford is the biggest employment center in the state. It's about 100,000 people who commute in every single day, with by far the largest private payroll generated in the state. In addition, as you all know, and a source of pride, but also burden and responsibility, we are home to a number of institutions that serve the region or the state but pay no taxes, whether those are our hospitals or our colleges or the sewage treatment plant and the trash burning energy power plant down in the South Meadows, or the countless social service agencies that support so many, not only of our most vulnerable and needy residents, but of the state's most vulnerable and needy residents. And of course, there's an enormous concentration of tax-exempt property as well. And so we as a city represent a vitally important part of the state of Connecticut as the capital city, the largest employment center, a cultural hub, and the city that supports so many of our neighbors by hosting all of those non-taxable uses. When we took office, as you know, we had gaps that were too large to be solved through cuts alone, and yet we had to make cuts. And at the years past, these budget hearings in the years past, we had to talk about those very, very tough cuts. And so what I've laid out for you here is just a reminder of some of the difficult things that we've done over the past couple of years as we fought for stability. We eliminated a large number of positions, including many layoffs. We had to shift our model in policing. We had to drastically reduce funding for many external agencies. We had to make difficult cuts in things that really matter, things like libraries and dial-a-ride. We had to make sure that we were looking for every opportunity to become more efficient, whether it was by renegotiating our leases or looking for energy efficiency opportunities, trying to design more effective workers' compensation policies, so many things that we did, which altogether, over the course of the last 2 years, added up to about $27 million in savings because of those tough decisions that we had to make. In addition to that, as you all know, we asked our municipal labor unions, our partners in labor, to be partners in building a long-term sustainable future. And I cannot thank enough those unions that stepped up to be part of that solution. Our firefighters were the first to step up. Our police officers, HPA, our 1716 AFSCME local, all stepped up in big ways to say we're willing to be part of that solution. And what that meant was agreements that really represented sacrifice. There are 4 years of zeros in every one of those contracts. Changes to a high deductible health care plan, significant increases in pension contributions by employees, changes to pension benefits, changes to retiree health care, changes to sick and vacation time, across the board, changes that saved millions of dollars in the near term, but also made long-term changes that will help the city stabilize in years to come. And altogether, those savings added up to about $10 million in this coming fiscal year. So $10 million that our partners in labor stepped up to help us save going into fiscal year 19. And I just want to again express my deep gratitude and our deep gratitude as a city for that partnership. And yet even with all that, we said last year, and we have to say it again today, that even with all that, the city would still face very, very deep deficits. And what you can see here are the forecasted deficits after the bipartisan budget that was passed last fall, which made some cuts to municipal aid, and before you factor in the new partnership that we're able to build with the state. These are the deficits we'd face even after that $27 million of cuts, and even after some of those labor savings. Not all of the labor savings are excluded from this. But you can see the size and the scale. And so our mission had to be, having demonstrated that discipline and that willingness to make hard choices, that we would build a new partnership. And last year we had a very tough conversation, but a necessary one, publicly, with the community, with legislators, saying there are 2 responsible paths forward. We can go the route of bankruptcy, or we can build a new partnership. I think we all believe that the best course for the state of Connecticut was to embrace that new partnership and to recognize that at the end of the day, you can't run a city on the tax base of a suburb, and you can't run a city where half the property is non-taxable and the part that is taxable isn't nearly big enough to support the basic services that our residents and our businesses deserve. And so we made that case, and thanks to a great partnership with our legislators and with legislators on both sides of the aisle, we were able to build a long-term structure. And so I want to spend a second to just talk about that agreement. Over the past couple of months, we were able to use the authority that the legislature enacted into law to forge a new partnership that rested on 2 basic things. An agreement by the state to take responsibility for making the debt service payments that we have on the debt that had already been built up over the years, and on the other hand, accountability under the Municipal Accountability Review Board. As part of that agreement on the contract assistance, or the debt assistance, the state takes that responsibility and pledges its full faith and credit to it. And it's a commitment that extends the life of those bonds. But we also committed to discipline over the life of that agreement, committed to reporting to the state treasurer, to the secretary of OPM. And what that makes possible is a period of stability where we have the opportunity to say that we're not just buying a little bit of time, but we've laid out together a path that is credible and that can lead to long-term sustainability. So what I'd like to review now with you is, if you can flip another slide, what that 5-year plan looks like, because it's important to see this budget that we're reviewing today in the context of that 5-year plan. And I won't go through every line of this. We're happy to pass this out, and you can look at it in detail. But what I want to highlight is you see that red line about 2/3 of the way down, which is the forecasted deficits. I know it's hard to see out there, and I apologize for it. But those are those big red bar chart lines that we saw before, those big deficits. With that assistance agreement from the state, those get dramatically reduced. It would be $14 million deficit next year, going out to $41 million deficit 5 years from now, before you factor in other elements of the stability plan. And those other elements are this. Number one, the labor savings that I talked about. Number two, some OPEB cost savings or other post-employment benefit savings, because we are going to be moving our retirees who are over 65 onto the Medicare Advantage plan. The benefits of that plan are as good, or in some cases better, and in many cases less costly to the retirees than the current plans. But because of the federal subsidy that comes with Medicare, we're going to save about $2.1 million. We're also setting for ourselves the goal of not borrowing any new money for the next 5 years, not issuing new debt every year. And that takes out a significant cost, not just from next year's budget, from the years down the road, because every year that you issue debt, you pile on a new cost that builds year after year. So by aiming at 5-year period of no new issuance of debt, we take about $4 million out of next year's budget, but we take almost $19 million out of the fiscal year 23 budget. And that's a really important part of that long-term plan. We also know that we're going to have to continue to work for new savings. And every single day and every single year, we're going to have to find new efficiencies, new savings. And so we've built that in as well, but not targets that are so high that we think they can't be achieved. We've set goals that we will need to work to hit, but we believe we can hit them. And what that means altogether is that if you look at that highlighted line, second from the bottom, for the next 5 years, we believe that with this new partnership from the state, it's actually possible to have balanced budgets for the next 5 years, and that's probably the first time in about 25 or 30 years that the city of Hartford could say that with credibility. In addition to that, if all the pieces of this plan remain in place, the partnership with the state, the discipline we've shown, I believe we will have that commitment from the 3 big insurance companies that committed to provide $10 million a year to the city as part of a comprehensive and sustainable plan. If some of the cuts that were proposed by the governor earlier this year do not go into effect, that will be another few $1 million. And taken all together, that's going to leave us with some extra money beyond what we need to balance our operating budget to do the capital investment. And I wanted to highlight this because this is a really key part of this plan. This is a really key part of being able to not issue new debt each year over the next 5 years. We're trying to create an operating surplus that we can dedicate to capital investment. What that means, number one, is we've got to stay disciplined and run a very tight ship. Number two, we have to maintain those partnerships. And number three, we're going to have a very lean capital improvement plan. We're going to focus on the essentials only. Melissa will talk in more detail about that, but that's going to be a part of our reality over the next few years. On the next slide, I've said much of this, but I do want to pause to talk about this for a second. The 5-year plan projects balanced budgets. It projects modest capital investment that we're doing on a pay-as-you-go basis every year without new borrowing. It does not allow for us to lower the mill rate. I wish it did, but it doesn't. And it probably will not allow us to do any significant rebuilding of our fund balance anytime soon. We're going to work toward that, but it's going to take a lot of time. And I want to stress those things because I want to make sure people don't think that suddenly we've got easy times ahead. We're still going to be working against that basic structural problem of being a city built on the tax base of a suburb, but we at least do it with some stability. Now, turning that stability into long-term sustainability, making sure that this isn't just a few years that we're looking at, but a longer period of time, it depends on maintaining the state agreement that was done. It depends on making sure that the state doesn't pull back the assistance that was offered in that bipartisan budget. It depends on continued discipline on our side. It depends on that corporate contribution, which in turn depends on those other things. And most important of all, Council President, could you pass me that water? Most important of all, it depends on economic growth. Moody's put out a report today which highlighted the fact that while the agreement that was reached with the state provides important stability, new revenue generation is still necessary. New growth is still necessary, and they are absolutely right. And so what we'll do over the next few years is use this period of stability to achieve real growth. I don't know if it's quite summer yet, but I think I'm getting one of those summer colds. And so we will have to work hard to continue the kind of investment that we've been fortunate to see, whether it's the private investment that's come into the Goodwin Hotel or the private investment that's coming in alongside CRDA to the Pearl Street and Trumbull Street, whether it's the development that's been done on Capitol Avenue or down in Coltsville, whether it's projects like Westbrook and Bowles or development down in Parkville. We have to continue to focus on growth as intensely and aggressively as we can, because the key to long-term sustainability is making sure that we use this period of stability to grow. And that's what we're going to be focused on. Now, I'm going to just start by talking a little bit about the budget that we proposed this year, and then I'm going to turn it over to our CFO, Melissa McCaw, to go in more detail. But I want to start with going through our core goals in this budget. None of this should be a surprise. The first is to manage with discipline and rigor and push for savings while at the same time delivering core services. To meet our fiscal challenges without increasing the mill rate especially on our small and mid-sized businesses, which we know labor under a really high tax rate of 74 mills, by far the highest in the state and really one of the highest, if not the highest, in the country. We're going to continue to streamline our government operations and try to make our government more efficient, and we're going to continue to try to build support for that partnership with the state of Connecticut to make sure that it's maintained. And as we work towards growth, we are going to work not just to retain those existing employers that we have and encourage those employers to grow, but also to try to promote economic opportunity for Hartford residents, including our returning citizens. You know, when I talk about growth, it's not just about getting a new building built or getting a blighted building rehabbed. It's also about trying to create opportunity for our residents who can in turn reinvest in our community. And with the tight resources we have, we're going to continue to try to do that. And finally, on the next page, we're going to maintain our focus, as we have over the last couple of years, on public safety and on youth engagement. Melissa will talk a little bit about what we're doing on the staffing side and police and fire, but as you know, we've been recruiting aggressively, and we're going to continue to do that. We've been investing in technology to magnify the impact that our law enforcement officers can have, and we're going to continue to focus on the improvement and rehabilitation of blighted property because that's a key part of strengthening our neighborhoods and contributing to a sense of stability in our neighborhoods. And finally, on youth engagement, we've tried to make that a priority across the board, whether it's with the private fundraising to support the Youth Service Corps, or whether it was with maintaining our funding for summer youth employment last year, even as the state cut theirs. That's an area that we're going to continue to try to prioritize and protect, even in these tight budgets. So with that, again, I want to thank everybody for being here, and I'd like to turn this over to our CFO, Melissa McCaw, to walk through the fiscal year 19 proposed budget in more detail.
Good evening. So the fiscal 2019 recommended budget is an essential services only budget. You'll see on the slide in front of you that total revenues in 2018 were $563.3 million, and the fiscal 2019 budget is recommending $567.3 million for both revenues and expenditures. This slide really emphasizes the following, that the fiscal 2019 budget retains the deep reductions that we made in 2017 and 18 that the mayor walked you through. And essentially what we do here is we remove debt and other capital investments to demonstrate that if you have an apples to apples budget in 2018 to 2019, this budget is actually a 0.4% reduction. So fiscal 2018, excluding debt and other capital investment, $559.1 million, as compared to fiscal 2019, $556.8 million, a 0.4% reduction. Next slide, please. This slide provides you with a more detailed understanding of the components of our revenue budget. The two largest revenue sources are our intergovernmental revenues, which primarily is comprised of the municipal aid that we receive from the state of Connecticut, as well as our general property taxes. From fiscal 2018 to fiscal 2019, you'll see that general property taxes are increasing by 1.8%, revenue budget to revenue budget. This general property tax line item reflects the grand list growth of 0.12%. From the 2016 to the 2017 grand list, our grand list is approximately $4 billion. In addition, the general property tax budget reflects an increase in our motor vehicle mill rate from 39 to 45 mills. This is consistent with the current state law. In the licenses and permits revenue category, 80% of the revenues are generated from building, mechanical, plumbing, and plumbing permits. Historically, this revenue category has been as high as $7.5 million, but it is variable based on the types of construction that would be occurring in the city. The 2019 recommended revenue budget is $5.7 million. And from 18 adopted to 19 recommended, this is actually a 5% decrease. And so the 18 adopted level was established conservatively, given the fact that historically revenues have ranged well in excess of $6 million. But we have made an adjustment in fiscal 2019 to adjust revenues consistent with current year projections. Other larger items, revenue from money and property, this would be comprised of our short-term investment income on cash, in addition, lease and rental income from city-owned buildings. I think it's important to note that within intergovernmental revenues, that the municipal aid that is assumed reflects the governor's proposed fiscal year 2019 revenue levels for municipal aid. Charges for services is primarily comprised of the conveyance tax when properties sell, and items that would flow through the clerk's office, such as transcripts and filing of records, things of that nature. And we're currently projecting a 3% increase above the fiscal 2018 levels, and this is consistent with the projection for the current year. One of the other larger line items to make note of would be other financing sources. This is a revenue line item that reflects the revenues from the parking authority, so net income from the parking authority. Also, our revenues associated with the Downtown Northern Stadium revenues affiliated with private duty jobs, so the net income. And so you'll see that there is an increase, 6.7 million to 16.5 million. And so the change from 18 to 2019 reflects that we're building in the $10 million corporate commitment, and this is offset by a $300,000 reduction in stadium revenues due to the city no longer able to receive the admissions tax revenues. This is as reflected in the state budget that passed for 2018. From an expense side of life, you will see that overall, the 18 adopted budget of $613 million. For fiscal 2019, we propose a recommended expenditure budget of $567.3 million. That is a 7% reduction, but of course, if you adjust for debt and other capital, it is a 0.4% reduction, essentially flat. Major variances from 2018 to 2019. First, payroll. You'll see that there's a 1.2% increase, about $1.2 million. As the city has shifted to a pay-as-you-go CIP model, capital improvement program model, there are positions that historically have been funded with CIP or bond proceeds. And so now that we're moving more towards a general fund model, we also have to pay for those positions out of operations. So that would be one of the primary driver to that increase of 1.2 million. Within the benefits line item, so benefits would include our health cost, our pension cost, Social Security, things of that nature. You'll see that there is a 2.5% reduction, or approximately $2.4 million, and that would be reflective of incorporating the savings that Mayor Bronin spoke about, such as the healthcare savings due to shifting to a high deductible health plan for a majority of our unions, as well as the Medicare Advantage plan for our over 65 retirees, and also healthcare expenditures are trending more favorably. So budget to budget, you see a 2.5% decrease, but had we not done that mitigation, we probably would have seen a 6% increase overall. Within the debt and other capital, the change of $43.2 million reflects the state taking on the city's debt service that we would have otherwise budgeted in this category, as well as an adjustment on the other capital investment. As I'll walk you through it and further in the deck, but within the $15.3 million, what we have funded is $10.5 million of general fund resources towards our CIP budget, as well as the stadium debt and some other small debt line items. The library, 0.6% increase. This is reflective of the increased cost associated with the MRF pension plan. We are required by charter, as well as by our assistance agreement with the state, to fully fund the pension ADAC, and so this adjustment does that. And Metro Hartford Innovation Services, that is our IT function, 5.9% increase. This is reflective of previously negotiated union adjustments that were not yet built into the fiscal 2018 budget, and they're now incorporated into 2019. For education, I think it's important to note that we have flat funded or maintained our commitment towards education. Of that $284 million proposed appropriation, approximately $188 million comes from the state of Connecticut in the form of the ECS contribution, and the remaining $96 million is the city contribution. In addition, within other non-personnel, we are funding a $2 million line item for the replacement of aging vehicle equipment and technology. This represents approximately 25% of the total ask, and the city has not addressed this area in the past 2 years, so we're taking a step in the right direction to make sure that we're replacing these assets in a timely fashion. So of the $567 million total city budget, $283 million would be what we refer to as the municipal budget. So excluding education, what funding do we have to support all other city municipal functions and responsibilities? And so you'll see that the largest piece of the pie would be payroll, staffing, and OT. 38% of the city's municipal budget is for payroll costs. The blue and kind of mustardy yellow pieces of the pie reflect pension and insurance, benefits and insurances, one excluding pensions, and the yellow piece of the pie would be pensions and cash outs. And so those two items combined represent over 32% of the city's municipal budget. And you can see the other major line items within the municipal budget. From a personal services or a payroll perspective, of that $108 million in the fiscal 2019 recommended budget, 73% is to support public safety, police, fire, emergency services, and 10% for the critical services that our Department of Public Works provides. Important to know also that the fiscal 2019 recommended workforce is 68% smaller than it was 30 years ago. And if you were to actually exclude public safety, the city's workforce in 2019 will be 16% smaller than fiscal year 2015. The next slide just gives a perspective on our benefits and insurance budget, excluding pensions, which is about $48 million, which demonstrates that 75% of that line item would be health insurance, net of employee contributions. The other smaller line items would be for items such as workers' compensation, other property liability and insurances, and then all other benefits would be items such as Social Security, unemployment, offset by any reimbursements we receive. Our health insurance plan covers 3,200 active city employees and over 2,000 city retirees. Within benefits and insurances, our total recommended budget for pensions and cash outs is just short of $46 million. Our municipal employees retirement fund, our MRF fund, of that amount, it's $39 million to meet our annual required contribution. And so for fiscal year 2019, our total MRF contribution for the city is really 44.2, but if you exclude the education component, which is reflected in the $284 million line item for education, the portion the city funds on the municipal budget is $39 million plus an additional $1 million in the library. And so the remaining line items would be for the CMERS plan, for our 17-16 unions, a number of older closed plans, as well as cash outs for employees when they separate or retire, vacation and sick cash outs. A couple of key areas to highlight in the fiscal 2019 recommended budget, and the first is public safety. Within the fiscal year 2019 budget, within the budgeted staffing levels, there will be approximately 60 new police officers hired. And in addition, this budget reflects funding of 75% of the fire recruits that the second, two classes that occurred in fiscal year 2018, the second of which will graduate at the end of June. And it reflects the city's contribution of 25%, and the remainder of those positions are funded 75% by the staffing for adequate fire and emergency response grant that the city was awarded. From a public health quality of life perspective, this budget funds 2 zoning enforcement officers to address zoning compliance that's overdue and quality of life issues in our neighborhoods. This budget also maintains public services and programs. The library, our rec centers, our senior centers, our shelter funding is 100% maintained. In addition, the city has secured $2.5 million in private funding to continue the work of the Hartford Youth Services Corp. As we shift to talk about our capital improvement program, when we're thinking about CIP, we're thinking about preserving our critical assets and infrastructure. And so the types of assets we're thinking about are our streets, our school and city buildings, our parks, our public safety structures, ensuring that our buildings and our sidewalks, that they are fully compliant with ADA requirements. Taking a closer look at the city's infrastructure, we have over 216 miles of roads, 2,100 pavement marking symbols, 6 pump stations. We have 19,000 street signs, 13,400 signposts. We have our traffic signals, 1,400 crosswalks, 3,700 sidewalk ramps, 12 bridges, and you can see the full list. And so as we are shifting towards a pay-as-you-go CIP model, we are thinking about how do we maintain these assets with limited resources. And so the city is in what I'd call a capital needs triage. And as we make the decisions about what the limited resources go to, we're thinking about items of criticality, those that present a material risk, projects that prioritize health and safety or that are absolutely essential to government functions or to enhance quality of life. So just to refresh your memory, you will recall over the past 2 years that we have dramatically reduced our CIP program, taking into consideration that our fiscal reality limits our ability to fund all of the projects that really need to be addressed. We have more projects authorized than we can fund. We have over $300 million in authorizations that over the course of the next year we will seek to reduce and reflect reality of what the city can afford. For the fiscal year 2018, the remainder of our CIP expenditures will actually come from the general fund and through grant reimbursements. And so as Mayor Bronin emphasized, our plan projects no new debt issuances between now and fiscal year 2023. The city will shift to a pay-as-you-go capital expenditure model. We plan to spend approximately $20 million in fiscal year 2019, which of course will be subject to available funding. And so the table gives you an overview of the key areas in which these expenditures would occur in fiscal year 2019. For public safety, $3.4 million will primarily focus on radio replacements. Within public works, $10.1 million. We will focus on ADA improvements due to a recent court order. In addition, milling and paving, we have not addressed milling and paving in well over 1 to 2 years. There are flood control projects that are underway that we need to continue to make progress on. Our sidewalks, roofs that need to be replaced, traffic signalization projects that primarily are covered with non-city resources but might require a city match, our bridges, and then just the simple emergent needs that arise throughout the year and the municipal facilities that we must maintain. Within development, there are streetscape improvement projects, many of which rely on non-city, state grant resources, but might have a city component. We are building in funding for economic development initiatives and matching funds in case there's an opportunity to leverage federal and state grants. And from an educational perspective, within the $20 million for fiscal 2019, we will fund general building and roof repairs in our schools, as well as the Weaver lease while construction is underway. One other thing that's important to note about the educational funding, as you are aware, there are 2 large school projects, MLK and Weaver, that are still moving forward. The timeline in which the city will contribute its share of the cost will be in fiscal 20 and 21. So as we shift into those years, a larger portion of our CAP will be dedicated to meeting the city's contribution to those projects. In summary, the fiscal 2019 budget reflects the municipal recovery plan that we presented to the Municipal Accountability Review Board. It maintains investment in public safety hiring. It invests in quality of life. Fully maintains shelter funding. Summer youth employment and youth justice is continuing. Our senior centers, our rec centers, and our library are fully funded. This budget does not increase the mill rate for commercial and residential properties. It does not include any new borrowing, but rather we're shifting to a pay-as-you-go model. Essentially, it provides essential services while maintaining significant fiscal discipline. I'm going to turn this back over to Mayor Bronin for closing remarks.
Thank you, Melissa. And I also just want to say thank you to Melissa McCaw and her team. They are an outstanding budget team, and we are lucky to have them. I will close very briefly. I want to make one comment on one thing for context, and then close very briefly. As Melissa walked through, the budget includes funding for 60 new police officers. That's the only real significant hiring that's happening. And I want to stress that a large amount of those positions are refilling positions from which there's been attrition. So that does not mean we will have 60 more police officers at the end of this fiscal year than we did today. Although we do hope that we have now reached the bottom of our attrition, and we're now in the rebuilding mode. So that does mean that as a result of that hiring, we'll be on the path back up to what we believe is a more appropriate and sustainable staffing model that helps us in the longer run to reduce those overtime costs. But I want to make sure everyone understands that that doesn't mean there'll be net new 60 police officers at the end of this year. Let me just close by emphasizing again what I said before. I hope everyone sees this budget in the context of the efforts over the last 2 years, which were to make very difficult decisions over the last couple of years, to not shy away from cuts, but to recognize that there was a limit to how much we believed we could responsibly cut before damaging our ability to fulfill our obligations to our residents. We made those tough decisions, and this budget maintains those decisions. In the years ahead, our budget will be tight. And we will have a lot of eyes on us as we budget in the years ahead. We have an obligation to maintain our discipline, both because we owe that to our taxpayers and because we need to make sure that we maintain this partnership with the state. So our budgets will be tough and tight, and we must stay disciplined. Next slide, please. And if we do that, if we can maintain that partnership with the state, if we stay disciplined, if we, as a result of those two things, are able to get the corporate community to fulfill that conditional commitment, and if we focus as hard and as effectively as we can on growth over the next 2 years, I think we've got the best shot that we've had in a long, long time at putting this city on a sustainable path for the long run, and that's our goal, because we want to make this city the vibrant heart of this region and a place where every resident, no matter where they live and no matter what neighborhood they're in, feels like they've got a share in a Hartford that's on the rise. So thank you again, everybody, and Council President, I'll turn it back to you.
Okay, thank you, Mayor, and thank you to Melissa and your team. So at this point, we will go into public comment. We have a few people signed up. So first, hopefully you can hear me. Everybody will have some time to share whatever is on their mind with respect to the budget. Okay, now it's back on. And, you know, try to limit your comments to 3 to 5 minutes, but we have a few people signed up. And the first person on the list is Dave Yano, and please remember to state your name, your address for the record, please.
You can just leave both mics on, I think.
Good evening, council members, fellow residents of Hartford, and visitors to the city of Hartford. My name is Dave Yano. I live at 150 Warrenton Avenue. I'm a retired Hartford Public Library employee. I'm also the former district vice president of AFSCME 1716, Hartford Public Library. I'm a commissioner on the MDC Commission and a commissioner on the Veterans Commission for the city of Hartford. I was very much taken aback by what the newspaper said in regard to the city of Hartford by our fellow residents of Connecticut, particularly the Republican leaders, who talked about the money that they were giving to the city of Hartford to try to sustain itself as if we were illegal aliens from another planet. Who do they think lives in the city of Hartford? There are a lot of single parents, a lot of veterans, a lot of mothers and fathers, working people that live in the city of Hartford. And as the capital, I would like to ask them, what would they like to have half of their properties tax exempt and take a turn at being the capital of Connecticut for a while and see what it's like. We've dealt with this problem over many years, and we finally come up with a solution where the state is going to publicly support the city of Hartford, which is what they should do. Some of the things that I believe should be done to do that, I believe that we need, and the city council elected officers need to look at the cost of the war to the city of Hartford and the state of Connecticut and the nation in general. The city of Hartford from 2011, just up to 2011, has lost $445.5 million in federal tax dollar. The state of Connecticut's lost over $25 billion in federal tax dollar. There's your economic sustainability right there. And it really upsets me as a combat veteran of Vietnam that I see all of these businesses like Electric Boat, UTC, Sikorsky, and Colt get major grants and funding for their businesses while the libraries are closing, the schools are closing, and public service works are being cut back all over. Now, I was informed by a sitting representative that I do not live in a democracy. I live in a representative republic, which means that the elected officials can choose who they want to represent when they pass their laws and ordinances. I was very much upset by this comment, and I let it be known that I believe I live in a democracy, and that's why I'm here speaking. We're the ones who show up to talk about what we would like to see the city of Hartford do. All right? I don't know who else you're representing when you hear us up here. I'm sure you try to represent everyone, but I would hope that you would listen to those of us who stand up and identify ourselves and how we feel about what's happening in the city of Hartford. I do not like the fact that entry-level jobs were destroyed at the library by shutting down 3 branches that the community is really in need of. And I'll tell you the feeling I got about that. I was at the Mothers United Against Violence March with Reverend Brown on Saturday, and the grandmother of Keon Huff came up to me and said, "How are you doing in your library over there at Goodwin? I haven't been there for a while." And I had to tell her that the Goodwin Library is not open anymore. And the Mark Twain Library is not open anymore. And the Blue Hills Library is not open anymore. And Hopkins hours have been severely, reduced. These are the kinds of entry-level jobs and the kinds of things that the parents and the children in Hartford need. These are the kind of things that you're talking about that are quality of life. And I think that you need to refocus on that. If the elected officials as a group stood up and talked about the cost of the wars and how the many millions of dollars we've lost overseas, they could overcome this paranoia that the American public has about being in fear for their lives. Nobody is going to invade this country. So I would like you to please take a look at the cost of the war and how it's affecting the city of Hartford, and also look at the entry-level jobs that these libraries and schools and public works provide for the city of Hartford and the residents of Hartford who you want to employ. Thank you.
Thank you. Leslie Hammond.
Leslie Hammond, One Linden Place. Thank you, Mayor Bronin, for your continued commitment to our city. It really helps a lot. I mean that. Melissa, thanks for all your hard work on this. I love details, and you're really good with details. I'm really glad that we can continue to fund the library, but like Dave talked about, I hope we continue a dialogue with them about the branches that they closed. I know for a while they were talking about maybe putting some of the branches in some of the schools. Of course, that would have to be done right. I understand that. I also know they own the building where Goodwin was, so I wonder what they're planning to do with that. And then as far as, our income, even though we're able to keep the mill rate the same for the corporate, I know that there's a lot of grumbling. I hear it being a real estate agent. About the taxes that the corporate have to pay. So we still need to continue to figure out a way to get that down. I don't know if you saw the news today, but Norwich is taxing their nonprofits. I know we've talked about it. I'm thinking MDC, Mira, you know, I just feel like there's a lot more they could be giving to us. I don't know about the hospitals, Trinity. Certainly there's a lot of small nonprofits and churches that probably can't afford it. But I'd really like us to look at that and also continue to look at what we can do with any of the state land, like we are talking about on Capitol, taking back some of that state land. You know, maybe it's time to, you know, if they don't really fund the pilot totally, is to take back some of the state land where we can. And also, I really encourage you, Mary Brown, and keep up about talking about pilot with the suburbs, because I'm really getting a pushback from people about feeling like they're just handing us, you know, this money. And, you know, I think the more we really explain to them about, you know, our situation, not that they're going to hear us totally, but I think we need to keep it up so we don't look like we're a poor stepchild that they're just helping us out. So thanks for all your hard work, you guys. I know it's not easy.
Thank you, Leslie. Next, we have Hyacinth Yeni.
Good evening, everyone. Hope you're all doing well. Mayor Brown. I'm Hyacinth Yeni, live in the south end of Hartford. I must say, first thing, I like your proposal. Your 5-year outlook, perfect, looks good. I like the fact that we are putting ourselves on a diet. No more splurring, doing all crazy things with money that we don't have. I want to thank you also for working really hard with the state legislative to get this oversight board to keep us on task, and I think that was a big effort, and I do want to thank you for doing that. I'm hoping the mayor and council people work together and maintain this budget that we have presented to us here. So that's one of the things that's really important to us as a neighborhood, as a resident. We can't afford any more tax increase, that's for sure, because we've been taxed out of land and home and everything. And I'm so happy too that the state is, you know, with your help, your effort, are able to help us pay some of these back tax or back grant that we have out there. I also want to thank you for maintaining the public safety program, all of it. We are really grateful for that. Our public safety, police, fire, public works, our centers. Now, one thing I want to say is that we hear a lot of talk about the libraries and closing. And if we look for real and see what's happening in our city, the kids that we had years ago that goes to library is not there anymore. They're all bused to the suburbs and a bus from 5 o'clock in the morning to 6 o'clock at night. So there's no kids to go to these libraries, so I have them open, some of them. And we need to do a better job of looking at the schools that we have, because we don't need this much school anymore. I know it hurts some parents to know that schools are going to be closing, but the point is that we have to have a real good strategic plan that works so parents won't have to feel like they're losing their neighborhood school. In a way, we need to do it so they can feel like we're gaining more support for our neighborhood in the schools that we have. But too many schools are in the city and we can't afford them anymore. Definitely our streets are in bad condition. Infrastructure is desperately needed, okay? We look at the condition of some of our our streets and you wonder, does anyone ever even live here? But it is true. So I'm hoping that we will get that straight and make our street looks much better. And I am sure glad that you put in for 2 zoning officers, because it makes no sense to me to have a zoning department when we have no one to go out and do the work. Okay? So I think this is just a natural thing to happen. And I'm hoping that we have enough people to deal with the issue around blight, because God knows we got a lot of blight in the city. If we can get all those buildings back up and running on the tax roll, we could do a lot better in the city. So as you continue to work and those pilot funding and stuff like that, I too are confronted most times with the issue of why is the city looking for a handout? We're not looking for a handout. Look how many of you come into our city, and we have to pay, So the point is that we're looking for legislative support to say we do need to fund pilot. So I think that we'll continue to, support you on, Mr. Mayor. And I'm hoping, as I said, you all work together for the betterment of this city. And thank you for the diet that you've put us all on. Thank you.
Thank you. And unless there are any other members in the audience who did not sign up, okay, I see one. Please come. And remember to state your name and your address for the record, please.
Good afternoon, Mayor, members of the council, the general public. My name is Anadelia Saraga Siri. I live on 197 Fairfield Avenue in Hartford. And I just want to say thank you for the budget that you have presented, Mayor. And I agree with everything that Hyacinth has said. I'm a member of the 6th District Democratic Town Committee. And looking at the whole aspect, the only concern that I have is the 39 schools. I'm very pro-education. I think that's the only way that our kids can make it in life, if they have a good education behind them, besides the love and support of their families. But when you're looking at the total population, I really don't know how many children we're talking about. It seems like 39 schools is too much. It seems like it's too many, and I think that needs to be taking a closer look. If we can be able to consolidate more schools, I know they were talking about possibly doing 2. Those resources can probably be better utilized to enhance the educational quality of the children in Hartford. I'm very concerned about the ones that are getting bused out of town, ones that are coming in. I think we really need to concentrate on the neighborhood schools. So that we can have more children in the city that's getting the quality of education they should be getting, like we used to have in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s. That's my comment back. Thank you for a great job.
Thank you. Anyone else? Please come forward.
Mayor, Council President, Gene Siri, 195 Fairfield Avenue, my wife Annie. I'm here for a different reason. I'm going over some of the slides that were in your handout, Mayor. And I'm deeply concerned about slide number 18 that shows the pie chart and the large green section. And there's a little thing that says payroll and staffing and OT, overtime. What is in place in the city to evaluate the need for the overtime that the divisions are dishing out with their payroll? And is there a check and balance system to make sure it's necessary for it to be done? I understand that the police department has a very, very large overtime budget. The fire department manages their overtime very well. They have mandates they have to meet. My second concern is with slide number 26, with your capital improvement projects. We're looking at public safety, and a public safety project will focus on a radio replacement program. Many, many years ago, I sat on the committee for the replacement of the existing CAD system in the city of Hartford. That was 20 years ago. They were negotiating doing this. My concern is there's a number of federal grants out there that makes money available for communications on a local, regional, and state basis now. Why aren't we looking at some of these grants, especially through the law enforcement grants, where there's large money available for them to do interoperability with other towns, especially when they're in pursuit or operating with them on a regional basis, as in a special SWAT team situation or regional training? And did anybody talk with the Capital Regional Council of Government to see if they have any grants or a grant writer that's available? Because they worked a number of years trying to develop interoperability with the radio systems. I got to give a pat on the back to the Chief Freeman. They were able to acquire a $1 million grant. They're presently working on an interoperability system with new radios coming in and a new safety features with accountability for their personnel. He was also very successful in getting a SAFER grant of $11 million that funded these 2 classes or 3 classes that went in. I really believe if grants management looked a little bit harder and dug a little bit deeper, we might be able to offset some of your capital improvement funds. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else? Going once, going twice. All right, well, that concludes our public comment hearing for tonight. So in closing, I want to say thank you to everyone coming out tonight. And now, as I stated earlier, this is obviously the opportunity to hear from the public regarding the recommended budget presented by the mayor. And now the council will go into our process of vetting and due diligence. So hosting some departmental hearings along with my co-chair of Operations Management and Budget, Councilman Clark. We will be having a series of public departmental committee meetings. And I just want to take the opportunity for those of you in the audience, but also for those of you viewing at home, to go through that schedule. And we'll make sure that this is posted online as well. So the first public hearing or departmental hearing will be Tuesday, May 1st at 5:30. All of the meetings will take place in the City Council chambers. This meeting is the section, or the focus is public safety. So we will have emergency services and telecommunication, police, fire, and public works. And then on Wednesday, May 2nd at 5:30, we'll have our financial overview with management, budget, and grants, finance, our capital improvement plan, the city treasurer, and human resources, I apologize. And then on Thursday, May 3rd, 2018, at 5:30, we'll have other entities, which include internal audit, Metro Hartford Information Services, Development Services, and the Hartford Parking Authority. Then we'll take a break, and we'll come back the following week on Tuesday, May 8th at 5:30, and the focus will be community and business collaborations, and that is Health and Human Services, Hartford Public Library, Board of Education, Family, Children, Youth, and Recreation. And then the last and final hearing will be on Wednesday, May 9th at 5:30, and that focuses city officers and legal matters, which include Corporation Counsel, Town and City Clerk, Register of Voters, the Mayor's Office, which include community engagement, communications in the 311 call center, and the Chief Operating Officer. And that will then conclude. If we do, sometimes these meetings go very late, so we do have a buffer at the end to add on an additional day if we need to do that. But our goal is to pass the budget before May 31st. So please stay tuned. We hope that you are able to join us. And again, thank you for coming out. It's really important in these times, especially as you've seen, our budget is tight. Our ability to do capital improvements is tight. So it's really important that we hear from the community and making sure that we have the right priorities. But again, thank you to the mayor and to Melissa for your presentation, and thank you for all of you who came out tonight, and those of you commented, and those of you listening at home. And thank you to my colleagues. Good night.